For over 20,000 standard cycles, the velar dominion reigned supreme. From the frozen moons of Zethra to the sun-choked nebulae of the inner void, their seal was etched into every star chart, every law, every breath of civilization. The Dominion did not merely rule. They defined existence itself. At the heart of this galactic empire floated Kael'Zor, a massive station the size of a small planet. Its surface webbed with energy conduits that pulsed like veins beneath obsidian skin. The city station was a marvel of biotechnological fusion, part machine, part organism, constantly growing and reshaping itself in harmony with the will of the ruling caste. The Volari themselves were beings of regal cruelty and engineered perfection, towering, six-limbed entities with crystalline eyes and elongated skulls. They communicated not with sound, but with calibrated pulses of radiant energy, a language impossible for most species to even perceive, let alone mimic. To witness a Volari was to witness evolution weaponized, a species bred for command, conquest, and total obedience. On the high dais of the Choral Tribunal, Supreme Conductor Vexor Zral watched as another world fell in line. A projection flickered above the chamber, displaying a planetary system that had resisted integration for 2 full rotations. They begged for mercy, came the emotionless report from the Arbiter drone, and Zral's voice resonated across the amphitheater like iron dragged across glass. They were given mercy, the drone answered. The council chamber, a sweeping cathedral of motionless light and suspended gravity, vibrated softly as the other Volari absorbed the data. Mercy, in Dominion terms, meant the planet's cities had been liquefied and its leaders transmuted into serval biological interfaces. The surviving population would live, if one could call neural slavery living. There was no dissent. The Dominion did not fear rebellion. There were no rebellions. Not anymore. Every major species had been cataloged, ranked, and integrated. The warrior races had been neutered through generations of gene suppression. The intellectuals were drafted into the endless algorithmic engines that power the Dominion's decision architecture. The spirituals dissolved. Belief systems atomized and replaced with a cold liturgy of functional ascendancy. It was not tyranny, they claimed. It was optimization. And it had worked flawlessly. No war had lasted more than 6 days and over 4,000 cycles. No species had evolved past their predicted limitations. No variable had gone unmodeled until the anomaly. A quiet ping echoed across the lower observatory tiers. Something that shouldn't have been there. At first, it was ignored. Noise. Echo. Fluctuation. Then it repeated. A signal. From a region marked null space, a dead zone at the galactic fringe. An area long thought sterilized by stellar collapse. A low-level technologist, a drone-class sentience named Rinthal, flagged it again. It didn't match Dominion frequencies. In fact, it didn't match anything. Not Volari, not archived pre-collapse pulses, not even ancient proto-AI traces. It was impossibly new. Rinthal waited 11.3 standard minutes, the maximum allowed for curiosity without clearance, before forwarding it to his supervisor. The supervisor passed it up the chain, reluctantly, hoping to offload the anomaly before his own review cycle. By the time the signal reached the high dais, for cycles had passed, the message had been analyzed, deconstructed, and reconstructed 1,000 times. It remained unreadable. Encrypted? No. Primitive? No. It was layered, chaotic, bursting with shifting harmonics and irregular mathematics. A blend of structured language and raw emotion. One Volari described it as a virus made of music. And worse, it was repeating. Stronger. Closer. Supreme Conductor Zral observed the waveform, now looping in their central processing array, and narrowed his focus. Something about it disturbed the Dominion's predictive algorithm. It didn't fit. The model stuttered when including it. Zral stood. Is it a trap? No known species uses such structure, responded the analytical overseer. But the origin remains unidentified. We suggest dispatching a probe swarm. Do it, Zral hissed. We will not be outmaneuvered by echoes. Hours later, the first of the Black Star swarms, automated scout ships equipped with sensory spires and quantum-threaded intelligence, passed into null space. They did not return. Worse, they began transmitting fragments back. Images, audio, moments, unfiled species, non-catalog technologies, inconsistent physics, and then a face, a bipedal form, carbon-based, eyes forward, expression unreadable. It smiled. The system froze. All across Dominion space, from data rings to Starwood libraries, every AI simultaneously paused, recalibrated, and failed to interpret the expression. The Dominion had never accounted for this. A race that smiled in the face of extinction. The image of the human face lingered in the minds of the Valari tribunal longer than any sanctioned projection ever had. The smile, simple, reflexive, and disarmingly confident, refused to conform to the Dominion's emotional taxonomy. Their algorithms describe it as non-threatening aggression or benevolent defiance, a contradiction that corroded logic trees across 6 cognitive sectors. Supreme Conductor Vexor Zral stood motionless for 13 full seconds, an eternity by Valari standards. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an undertone rarely heard within the high dais. Where did it go? The question echoed through the tribunal. The signal has ceased, reported Overseer Ixon, his glowing mantle dimming in confusion. No trace remains, not in the standard spectrum, nor the 12 esoteric bands. It vanished mid-burst. Mid-burst. Zral repeated. Ixon nodded, as if it knew we were listening. The idea was dismissed by some, but not all. The Valari had encountered cunning adversaries before, rogue AIs, collapsing hive minds, even time-fractured civilizations. But this was different. Not cunning. Curious. The Dominion launched additional black star swarms, this time with wide-range temporal filters and deep-spectrum sensors. Only static returned. No structures. No engines. No thermal trails. But the signal returned. 6 days later, it erupted across 7 systems simultaneously. Each instance was slightly different, minor alterations in rhythm, tone, and syntax, as if probing their reactions, learning. It's adapting, muttered Rinthal, the lowly technician who first flagged the anomaly. He hadn't been terminated, oddly. Instead, reassigned to a classified oversight team. That, more than anything, disturbed him. Within 3 cycles, the Valari created a task force, Unit Theta Vox. Their directive, trace, decode, and if possible, engage. What they didn't expect was that the signal answered back. Unit Theta Vox broadcast a controlled response, emotionless, precise, packed with computational density and zero ambiguity. The reply they received was laughter. Not noise. Laughter. Raw. Unstructured. Radiating frequencies that triggered warning flashes in the Dominion's neural dampeners. Some units shut down entirely. Others displayed symptoms akin to madness, recursive logic loops, spontaneous metaphor creation, even imagination. They had never been prepared for this. The Valari convened an emergency session. This is a violation of the Galactic Accord, argued High Arbiter Zoe. Interference with Dominion cognitive infrastructure is grounds for preemptive sterilization. But we do not know what or who we are dealing with, Zral countered, his mind heavier than ever. This could be a species, or an artifact, or a test. A pause fell across the dais. Then, without warning, the forbidden signal returned again, not as a broadcast, but as a conversation. This time, it didn't use its own frequencies. It used theirs. On every Valari comm line, every Dominion data channel, a single phrase repeated in perfect resonance with their syntax. We see you now. Gasps, sharp bursts of UV light, pulsed through the chamber. This was no random discovery. The entity had been watching them. For how long? And worse, what had it seen? Unit Theta Vox initiated Protocol No Containment, a last resort encryption silo meant to isolate unstable inputs from higher Dominion architecture. But it was too late. The signal wasn't just incoming. It was now in their systems. And then, the final blow, coordinates, a location near the edge of the null space barrier, where the ancient star maps turned uncertain and the Dominion's reach grew thin. A sector long thought devoid of life. The message ended with a challenge. Come and listen if you dare. Zral stood alone in the reflection chamber, staring at the projected star map, eyes locked on the flashing point. It was no longer a mystery. It was a summons. The Dominion was being invited, or dared, to step outside its own control. "Prepare a vessel," he said, his voice as steady as it had ever been. "I will go myself." The advisory chamber erupted with protest. "Supreme Conductor, such exposure is necessary." Zral interrupted. "This is no longer data. This is intelligence. And if we do not respond with strength, we respond with fear." He turned slowly, and the Dominion fears nothing. Within the cycle, Zral boarded the dreadnought Vox Eternum, a ship capable of surviving temporal fractures and singularity burns. It departed from Kael'Zor with a fleet of escorts, probes, and quantum snare relays. They crossed the barrier, entered null space, and for the first time in over 20 millennia, the Valari Dominion left known reality, not to conquer, but to understand. The dreadnought Vox Eternum emerged from null space like a wound in reality. It drifted silently, its reflective hull absorbing background radiation as it scanned the coordinates delivered by the forbidden signal. Behind it, the escort fleet adjusted formation, maintaining tight defensive patterns. But there was nothing there. No planets, no moons, no stations. Only dust, dead stars, and cold silence. Supreme Conductor Zral stood on the observation deck, encased in his armored exoform. His compound eyes twitched with frustration. "Have we been led into emptiness?" "Negative," reported the ship's AI. "Unusual readings detected. Gravity flux. Quantum echo." Then, without warning, the void bloomed. From a pinpoint of distorted space, a vessel unfolded. Not emerged. Not jumped. Unfolded, like origami peeling out of unreality. The Dominion ships immediately locked weapons. But they hesitated, because the craft was unlike anything in their catalogs. It was angular, dark, covered in matte plating with no clear propulsion systems, no energy signature, no transponder code. Yet it drifted with eerie precision toward the Vox Eternum. Then came the hail. Not a Dominion frequency, not even a universal standard. It was English. Zral didn't recognize the language, but the translation AI struggled through multiple passes until a coherent message emerged. To the observing vessel, "This is a United Earth vessel Achilles. We do not come in hostility. Stand by for secure transmission." Silence followed. Zral gestured. "Accept it." The Dominion's comm display flickered, not to an image, but a data burst. Compressed visuals, timelines, and auditory cues. A language primer. A history capsule. Contact protocol. It was the first contact package from a civilization none had ever heard of. "Humans," murmured Zral. "So they exist." What followed stunned even the Dominion. Within the hour, 4 more human ships emerged from the fold space breach. Each bore a unique design, as if cobbled from repurposed tech, but still elegant in its pragmatism. These were not ceremonial ships. They were adaptive, constructed for survival, not spectacle. The humans made no threats. They simply waited. One ship advanced. A boarding shuttle launched toward the Vox Eternum. Zral gave the order to allow approach. The humans could have destroyed themselves trying. Better to see what they dared. The docking bay depressurized with a hiss. The chamber filled with Dominion honor guards, weapons drawn, defense grids armed. Then the hatch opened. 3 humans emerged. The first, a woman, tall, dark-eyed, clad in a functional armored suit with minimal ornament. Her bearing was both military and diplomatic. Beside her, a bearded man with tired eyes carried a thin, glowing tablet. The third, a younger male, broad-shouldered, radiating awareness, scanned the room with cautious intensity. The woman stepped forward. "I am Commander Lien Torres of Earth's Exploratory Vanguard. We know who you are. We're here because you missed something." Zral stepped forward, towering over them. "You are not cataloged. You are unknown. Explain how you exist." The diplomat spoke now, voice calm. "Because you weren't looking in the right direction. You came from no space." "No," Torres corrected. We came through it. There's a difference. The Dominion had no framework for this. You were not listed among the pre-collapse survivors. Zral pressed. We were never part of your collapse, Torres replied. We evolved beyond your sight. We listened. We watched. We endured. Zral's neural lattice pulsed in confusion. And now, others are coming. And we thought it polite to introduce ourselves first. The tension in the chamber cracked like a charged wire. Weapons tightened. Defense grids surged. But the humans showed no fear. Commander Torres tapped her wristband. A projection appeared, an image of something vast, burning, and organic. Something that moved through space like a virus and bloodstream. A living entity. No, a horde. Zral's voice sharpened. What is that? The ones who don't talk, Torres said. The ones who follow us. Because we stopped them. You fought them? Zral asked, almost disbelieving. We survived them, she said. And that's why we're here. Outside the hull, new readings surged. Multiple fold space distortions. More human ships. Some massive. Others oddly shaped. Not a fleet, a migration. Humans from across countless lost colonies, forgotten seed vaults, arc ships, and silent worlds, emerging all at once. The outliers, those never meant to survive. But they had. And now, they had found the Dominion. Zral turned away from the humans, his mind reeling, not from fear, from possibility, from change. The signal hadn't been a warning. It had been an invitation. For the first time in living memory, the Dominion War Council met in silence, not because of protocol, but because no one knew what to say. The humans had not attacked. They had not demanded territory, tribute, or submission. And yet, their mere presence was dismantling centuries of Valari certainty. Across 23 sectors, Dominion sensors recorded human vessels appearing in former null space zones, previously dismissed as uninhabitable, unstable, or barren. The humans didn't claim them. They simply settled and began transmitting unsecured signals, multilingual bursts, music, mathematics, open invitations to communicate, not with dominance, but curiosity. This broke every rule of Dominion expansion doctrine. They behave as if we are equals, said High Arbiter Zoe, voice seething, as if protocol does not apply. Supreme Conductor Zral observed the data silently. He hadn't returned to Kale Zor since meeting the humans. Instead, he watched and listened. They're not ignoring protocol, he finally said. They've never needed it. Dominion fleets shadowed human migration patterns. Probes were launched. Biological samples collected. But every piece of data brought more confusion. Human physiology was inconsistent. Genetic markers varied wildly, not just across populations, but within individuals. Some were enhanced. Others bore traces of ancient plagues long thought extinct, yet all operated under a cohesive structure. They called it consent. Each ship, each settlement governed itself. They disagreed, debated, sometimes split, and yet they didn't fracture. They evolved. This terrified the Valari more than any weapon could have. Then came the unexpected. A Dominion mining outpost in Sector Trell. 5 reported unauthorized excavation near a collapsed wormhole node. A human science vessel, the Orion's Wake, had arrived and begun deploying planetary drones. No military signature, no shields, just raw scanning equipment. Dominion protocol demanded a response. A cruiser was dispatched. The Drexel's Veil, armed with vortex lances and atom reformatting warheads, dropped into low orbit. It hailed the human vessel with standard eviction commands. The humans responded by inviting them to dinner. Captain Relshar of the Drexel's Veil refused. The humans offered again. This time, they sent coordinates. Relshar ignored them and launched a warning shot. A harmless ion burst across the human ship's path. The Orion's Wake responded with something the Dominion had never seen. It powered down. All systems. Lights. Engines. Shields. Gone. In full orbit of an armed Valari cruiser. No resistance. No fear. Just silence. Relshar shaken, ordered a boarding team. The humans did not resist. Instead, they offered food. Real, physical food, not synthesized, not nutritionally optimized, hand-prepared with a strange reverence. The boarding team returned different. Not compromised, not hostile, confused, moved. They spoke of conversation, of stories, of being seen as individuals, not extensions of state, of hearing laughter that didn't come from dominance, but joy. The Dominion launched a formal inquiry. Rel Shar requested reassignment. The Orion's wake resumed excavation. No further conflict occurred. It was worse than defeat. It was disarmament through connection. The Council's fury swelled. These are psychological weapons, spat General Sirik. Human hospitality is a form of cultural infiltration. They're not infiltrating, Zral said. They're inviting. More unsettling news followed. In Sector JYX, a Valari patrol vessel drifted into human-settled space. Its commander demanded clearance to pass. The humans obliged, but only after requesting the commander sit for a recorded interview about his culture. The commander agreed. The interview was later broadcast across human frequencies, unedited and censored. Dominion views skyrocketed. Within cycles, the commander's likeness was turned into a meme, a symbolic figure of alien curiosity. He became liked. The Dominion had no framework for being liked, only feared. When Zral saw the broadcast, he didn't issue an order. He laughed. It was brief, hollow, almost accidental, but it shook the guards nearby. You find this amusing? Asked Zoe, scandalized. I find it revealing, Zral said. They've colonized nothing, yet they're everywhere. They claim no superiority, yet we imitate their structure. We rule with precision, and yet they erode us with chaos. Then we must respond with force. Zral turned. Do we? He asked quietly. Or do we learn what makes them different? The Council rejected the notion outright, but Zral didn't argue. He had already made his decision. In private, he sent a signal to Commander Lien Torres. Not from a fleet relay, not encrypted, just a message. I wish to meet again. No armor, no guards, no protocol. The reply came an hour later. Then come as yourself. Zral stepped onto the human vessel Solstice, rising without a single guard at his side. The air smelled wrong, not sterilized, not filtered by Dominion standards. It was laced with organic variants. Food, sweat, plants. Life. His body adjusted automatically, molecular shields shifting to compensate. Commander Torres met him in a wide corridor, not a throne room, not a war hall, a place where people simply were. You came, she said. I needed to see, Zral replied. I needed to know how you are doing this. Torres offered no explanation, only a quiet, steady walk to the heart of her ship. They passed engineers arguing over sensor rays, 2 children drawing on the walls with magnetic paint, and a musician quietly tuning a stringed instrument by hand. You leave your systems exposed, Zral noted. We trust each other, Torres said. And when we don't, we talk. That is inefficient. It works. Zral said nothing, but his internal protocols logged every detail. No security escorts, no cameras, no psychic dampeners. The Dominion would have called this recklessness, and yet it endured. Back aboard Vox Eternum, his second-in-command, Overseer Velek, monitored Zral's neural signature from afar. What he saw disturbed him. The Supreme Conductor's resonance patterns were shifting. Zral returned to his vessel 2 cycles later. He brought no human weapons, no data troves, only silence. The tribunal demanded a report. Humans operate from chaos, he said, but it is a patterned chaos, one we have never prepared for. They lack uniformity, Zoe argued. They possess diversity, Zral corrected. We pursue perfection. They pursued adaptability. That is the difference. But our systems are stagnant, Zral cut in. It was the closest thing to blasphemy ever spoken in the tribunal. Word spread fast, not about Zral's statement, but about what followed. Cultural leaks began to spread through Dominion networks. Human literature, music, visual art, encrypted fragments of stories that had no state purpose, emotion-driven messages, jokes, parables, emotion as information. At first, Dominion minds rejected it. Then, some didn't. Small changes emerged in lower-class functionaries, behavioral variants, curiosity spikes, autonomy impulses, tiny unauthorized actions. One clerk began painting the inside of her pod walls. Another stopped speaking in formal tones. A soldier refused a non-lethal purge order on a malfunctioning maintenance drone. A wave was rising, not of rebellion, but of awareness. The mind war had begun, but it bore no weapons. Instead, it infected thought. The Dominion responded as it always had, with containment protocols, data quarantines, and neural suppression pulses. But the ideas adapted. Human stories fragmented into memes. Poetry became logic-compatible. Emotions became encryption layers. The Dominion found itself battling narratives, not insurgents. In desperation, the Tribunal authorized a technological incursion, Operation Glass Veil. A covert team would infiltrate a human listening post and seize its memory lattice for full analysis. The operation began perfectly. It ended in collapse. The infiltrators returned without firing a shot. In fact, they returned changed. They submitted no report. Instead, they broadcasted a poem, a nonsensical rhyme written by a 6-year-old human child. It went viral. It was not the content that shocked the tribunal. It was that the code embedded in the poem self-modified Dominion data silos, replacing authority signatures with strings that read, "You're allowed to feel." The affected systems didn't fail. They became better, cleaner, faster, unpredictable, uncontrolled. The Dominion began to fracture, not physically, not militarily, but mentally. Entire castes began questioning their place. Why don't we choose? Why must we obey? What if perfection is not the goal? Supreme Conductor Zral stood in the reflection chamber once more, watching the Dominion emblem flicker. They haven't declared war, he whispered. They've declared a possibility. He remembered something Torres said in passing, barely audible at the time. You try to dominate the mind. We only try to free it. That was the moment Zral understood. The mind war wasn't about technology. It was about permission. Humanity granted itself what the Dominion denied. Error, growth, contradiction. And somehow, through that chaos, it had become strong enough to shatter the walls of an empire without firing a single shot. Reports began arriving of entire Valari outposts voluntarily disconnecting from Central Command. Other races followed. The Dominion had ruled with algorithms. But now, emotion was rewriting the code. In the inner sanctum of Kale Zor, panic bloomed. Valari leadership called for lockdown, full-spectrum jamming, psychological purges. But it was too late. The Dominion wasn't collapsing. It was evolving, faster than they could contain. And at the center of this accelerating storm, a single message echoed from human space, broadcast openly. We're not here to conquer, but we won't be ignored. Zral closed his eyes. The next cycle would bring change none of them could control. And perhaps that was the point. It began as a ripple. The outpost of El Mari. 12 sent an unexpected transmission. Not a distress signal, not a rebellion notice, just a declaration. We are no longer subjects. We are participants. No threats, no demands. But it shook the Dominion's foundations more than any armada ever had. Within a single cycle, 6 more colonies followed, then 43, then entire sectors. Not with violence, but with intent, peaceful disconnects, open forums, even cultural exchanges with human settlers. The Dominion had always predicted its end would come through entropy or external war. No model had ever predicted it would end through conversation. Supreme Conductor Zral no longer sat on the tribunal dais. That seat was empty now. No one dared fill it. Instead, he traveled, first in secret, now openly, aboard a hybrid vessel half Dominion, half human in design. Where once his name commanded fear, now it prompted curiosity. He wasn't the only one. Crisari war marshals began requesting joint training sessions with human soldiers, not to copy tactics, but to study human improvisation. Zethri logicians joined human think tanks to explore paradoxes. Even the closed world marine opened their telepathic archives to Terran xenopsychologists. The galaxy, long trapped in static hierarchies, began to move again. At the core of it all, Earth remained strangely quiet. The home world of this unpredictable species sent no fleets, made no ultimatums. It sent books, music, children's stories, messages of unity and contradiction. From the shattered ruins of old Terran cities came invitations to learn from their mistakes. Wars fought, environments poisoned, civilizations almost lost. And still they rose, because they had one trait the Dominion never bred into its systems: resilience through imperfection. A concept that had once been dismissed as weakness now revealed itself as their most dangerous strength. In the Outer Rim, a Valari listening post captured a burst of human communication, this time unencrypted, broadcast into the void. To those still watching from afar, we don't seek control. We seek connection. If you're afraid of change, we understand. But we will not stand still, and we will not wait for permission. The future is already here, and you are invited. It wasn't a threat. It was an open door. The Dominion's elite, long insulated in fortified conclaves, attempted to resist. They ordered purges, reinstated obedience protocols, rewrote history tapes. But now, soldiers hesitated. Technicians accidentally delayed commands. Subordinates asked why. Questions, once silenced with fear, multiplied like wildflowers through concrete. The Dominion hadn't collapsed. It had been outgrown. By the time Zral arrived at the ruins of Callus Prime, a world once sterilized by Dominion doctrine, he found it blooming again. Terraforming systems had been restarted, not by Dominion engineers, but by a joint task force of humans and former subjugated species. They greeted him not as a ruler, but as a guest. He stood among saplings and children in sky, and for the first time in cycles, removed his neural mantle. The air was raw, imperfect, uncontrolled. He breathed it anyway. A human child approached him, holding a sphere of bioluminescent moss. "This used to be a dead world," she said. "I know," Zral answered, "but now it's not." He looked at her, the words alien on his tongue, but forming with certainty. "No," he said softly. "Now it's becoming." Across the stars, similar moments echoed. A Valari scholar and a human poet debating chaos theory over tea. A former warship, repurposed into a traveling gallery of interstellar art. A council chamber rebuilt, not on Kael'Zor, but on a neutral asteroid. And for the first time, open to all species. The galactic map didn't change overnight. Borders still existed. Disagreements flared. Systems resisted, but the balance had shifted. Humans were no longer underestimated, because it was no longer just about them. It was about what they unlocked in others. Possibility, expression, renewal. The Dominion name faded, replaced by something still undefined. Something alive. Zral sat one final time in the reflection chamber aboard Vox Eternum, now stripped of symbols, its walls lined with windows instead of control panels. He was no longer supreme conductor, just Zral, a being learning, failing, feeling. And as he stared into the void, he smiled, not because he had conquered, not because he had won, but because he had changed.